worldwide fans of the planet's hottest entertainment with an edge. Jaime En Fuego here, welcoming you to my namesake program once again, Enfuegotainment. That's right, you can just call me Fuego for short, and I extend a grande gracias for you tuning in to this advanced review of the upcoming film FORD V FERRARI, also known as MANS 66 in the UK and the rest of the world. And yeah, so as the title implies, this is the true story of when the Ford team finally took down Ferrari in 1966 at the Le Mans 24-hour race that was, I don't even know if it's still going down, but it was a big thing in France and probably still is. Now, let me just get this right off the bat right away. I am not a racing fan, and yet for this film to succeed, it definitely needs to captivate those that are not into this particular sport. And here on Enfuegotainment, I always cover the bueno, the malo, and the feo, some good, bad, and ugly in my reviews. And, you know, the bueno is the fact that it definitely succeeds at what I just mentioned. It makes this story of determination from the American automobile juggernaut, the creator of the car, you know, in Henry Ford, and his son's aspirations to take down the Italians and just get this victory after all of the Ferrari dominance, despite the fact that they were a bankrupt company at the time and were about to be purchased by, I think it was like Fiat or something like that. Anyway, but it makes the story very compelling, and even for somebody like me who, to be honest, I mean, racing, for me, it's like the South Park episode, turn to the left, and obviously this race is a little bit different in that regard. It's not just Daytona where it's like just do and such, and yet Daytona is also a plot point here in this film. And you know, I know that there is a big quotient of people here in the United States and throughout the rest of the world that like, you know, like Grand Prix and stuff like that, that enjoy racing, are car aficionados and stuff like that. Like they are, you know, I guess greasers is kind of a negative term, but I don't necessarily think of it that way. I have a ton of friends that love working on automobiles. It's their thing. It's a hobby. It's a passion. I don't share that. However, it's still turned into a tale that I found rather riveting, and that is definitely one of the biggest buenos in this, is that it's really just cool seeing the American determination here in play and all this other stuff, you know, in the early and mid 60s and stuff like that. And I also have to laud the performances of both Matt Damon as Shelby and also as you know, Miles, who's played by Christian Bale. I mean, they have great chemistry. The dynamic is very intriguing, and really more so than anything, I have to, like, at first I was like, it kind of feels more like Christian Bale's tale, but then at the very end you definitely know it's more so Matt Damon's tale, because he kind of, his perspective bookends the movie to a degree without really spoiling things, and I often choose to spoil only in the feo, in the ugly at the very end, you know. But yeah, both of their performances are tremendous, and Matt Damon really brings an interesting vulnerability to this role, but also like a swagger and a slight bit of arrogance as well, as does Bale. Bale, he's terrific in everything, you know. I mean, whether it's The Machinist, whether it's, I mean, you know, Rescue Dawn, I mean, all over the place. He is just a fantastic actor. I was never the biggest fan of him as Batman, you know, although I love Batman Begins, and I really enjoy The Dark Knight, and some people watching this review will think that's blasphemy! Blasphemy! Swear to me! Anyway, but yeah, Bale is great in this. But he's got this weird, like, kind of like, thing going on all the time. He's got this weird, like, you know, kind of like chagrined expression. I don't know. It's funny, but even the supporting cast, you know, Josh Lucas, John Bernthal, it's very, very well acted and quite compelling. And the race sequences are thrillingly shot. Definitely got to tip your hat to James Mangold as the director of this, who, I mean, he wowed the comic book fans with Logan, and to a lesser degree the Wolverine, you know, a few years before that. But I still contend that until it went into the silly Silver Samurai shite at the very end of that film, it was a pretty damn good X-Men movie, like X-Men, like spin-off offshoot sort of thing. But I mean, a lot of people forget that he really sharpened his teeth, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s and stuff with things like Copland, which is a immensely underrated Sylvester Stallone film in my estimation, where he gained all the weight and everything. Girl Interrupted, which was terrific. Angelina Jolie, you know, with the supporting actress nod and all that stuff. Also Walk the Line, which long before we got into this whole resurgence of biopics and stuff, I mean, there was Ray and there was Walk the Line. Those are the two in the mid-2000s that really set a precedence and kind of got people interested in those sort of stories about musicians once again. So Mangold directs the hell out of this movie. The acting is fantastic, and the story, for the most part, through especially the first 2 acts, is quite compelling. Here's where I gotta get to the malo, though, and the bad. And the bad is that, at least for me, not being supremely captivated by, you know, just racing in general, when we finally get to Le Mans and we're at this race in 66. I mean, we see briefly the attempt in 65, and then, but it's really all about 66, where, you know, it's common knowledge, you know, that's when Ford finally was able to overtake Ferrari. And, you know, I'm not going to give all of the details, but there's a lot of racing at the end of this movie, and for me, this film succeeds so much more when it's about the behind-the-scenes drama as opposed to the actual race itself. It's a 24-hour race, and when we finally get to it, it really feels like it, and I kind of contend, and there's a lot of people who love racing and love cars who will probably disagree with me, but for the casual moviegoer and reviewer like myself, this is where the film stalls. It really stalls in the 3rd act, and the race felt like it's 24-hour length. It really did. And another thing is that to really get this across to the casual film goer, I feel like you have to explain the rules of racing a little bit more. And this is where, I'll be honest, and I'm a sports guy, at least as far as, like, you know, like basketball and, you know, soccer, known as football more properly throughout the rest of the world. And, you know, I enjoy some American football, primarily of the collegiate variety, not so into baseball, a little into hockey, but nonetheless, I mean, I was a sports official for many years. Like, my first job as a kid when I was 12 years old was as a linesman, you know, for soccer games. And then I gradually, when I was 14, started working at the YMCA, and I was reffing all the kids. I was doing flag football, I was doing basketball, I was doing soccer, I was doing t-ball, like, and so you have to get proper certification and training in all of the rules. And I will admit that I am not versed in just the rules and the schematics and all of these different things that entail the sport of racing. I'm just not seasoned in it, you know, and so I was definitely getting confused about the aspects of, like, you know, just, you know, oh, you're 4 minutes ahead, and the switching of drivers, and, you know, I mean, he's like, it's a 24-hour race, so he's not going to be behind the wheel the entire time, and Christian Bale's character, Miles, is like taking naps at one point during the 66 Le Mans, and I was just, I'll admit, I was a little confused as to how it all works, although it did get me kind of curious to research how all of that goes, being a sports guy, you know, despite the fact that I segued more so into a love of, like, movies and music as I got a little bit older. I was a sports kid, all grown up, played soccer and basketball into my teens, and still even casually played both to this day, you know, indoor soccer and, you know, pick up games at the park of basketball and stuff like that. So I will admit that, you know, hey, it's a sport that's not for me, and I don't particularly like, you know, like, I don't know, like crap on it or anything, but it's just, I don't know, that's another thing that if I'm going to just, you know, objectively critique this, I will say, yeah, that was another, you know, hindrance in the film. And I also feel like the finale, as we get to it, and like the twist and stuff that transpires that they do in fact foreshadow at one particular point, I felt like it was handled hastily, and for that sheer fact didn't have as much of a poignant impact as it should have. And for that, on that note, I'm getting into the Feo, into the spoilers here, into the ugly, and yeah, Miles dies. Christian Bale's character, after they win the race, but he ends up getting screwed over, so he's like, you know, he's way ahead of the rest of his Ford team, and yet there is a lot of pressure for him to, like, get his foot off the gas pedal, you know, in those, you know, 7+ RPMs and everything, and allow his other two Ford teammates, to just kind of catch up, and then they'll all kind of cross the finish line about the same time. The victory is most definitely inevitable and imminent at that particular point. Ferrari's cars have crashed out and all this other stuff, so you know that they've lost, and if you've done any sort of historical research, you know that this was happening, and lo and behold, he ends up getting screwed over because for the sheer fact that one of the other racers, and it was McLaren, yeah, which is another car name that, like, I'm familiar with, the car term, for Shelby Fords, and it's a type of Mustang, if I'm not mistaken, and McLaren, it's another type of car, type of Ford or something. I don't know. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. But yes, these are names that I've heard thrown around from friends of mine that are just big time into racing and vehicles and things like that. So yeah, because of the fact that McLaren he started behind Miles, even though he finished behind him, but just barely, he ends up getting the actual victory in the record books and everything, and all of the accolades and the trophy and all that shizzle, despite the fact that Miles won Daytona. And I was curious if that actually happened in real life, or if that was just like fictionalized stuff here, and the fact that after the failure in Le Mans 65, Matt Damon's Shelby character, basically, he tells Henry Ford Jr., he's like, I will put my car company on the line so that Miles can race in this vehicle that we have been developing to go against, the Italians with. And if he wins Daytona, then you let him race the next Le Mans. And yeah, Miles wins Daytona, and yet, man, Josh Lucas is a shithead in this movie, and he plays it very well, and I mean, Bernthal is solid, Bernthal's solid. He doesn't, he really gets his screen time, especially when he goes to kind of try to persuade Ferrari to go into this ownership partnership thing that they end up feeling insulted in. But hey, it's still, the cast is great, but the ugliness is the fact that, yes, after Ford wins 66, but he's kind of screwed over, being Christian Bale's character Miles, out of victory. He goes back, and him and Damon just pedal to the metal once again, and they're they're back in California, and they're testing and everything, and he gets in an accident and he burns to death. And it's just handled so quickly, and it doesn't dwell upon the drama and the despair of it as well. And this is where, once again, I feel like the movie kind of falls apart in the third act. It's too long with the race, but it makes sense because it's a 24-hour race, and then it's too short in just the climax aspect of it, and just it loses some impact based on that. But all in all, I will rate this a 3 out of 5. Fuego Fabos here. Yes, this is definitely a Bueno movie, but out of the festival circuit, it was gaining some serious buzz for, a Best Picture contender. I do not think that at all. I definitely say acting nominations and maybe a directing nomination for Mangold, but definitely it's not going to win Best Picture, and I don't know. I would be averse to say, it'll probably get a nomination for Best Original Screenplay, or I'm not sure if it's an adapted screenplay or not, since there's probably been books written about how historic of a thing this was. So maybe it is an adapted screenplay. I'm not 100%. I would imagine it will get nominations for that, but I do not think it should win. That definitely needs to go to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But that is a discussion for another day. So I have been Jaime En Fuego. Thank you so very much once again. Gracias, danke, arigato, merci. Yes, merci being especially, imperative to say here. And yes, you can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Here, obviously, there's going to be some more Star Wars coverage coming as we march toward The Rise of Skywalker's release next month in December, episode 9, baby! And there's been lots of coverage that I've already done this past year, including 3 new Star Wars novels in Dooku Jedi Lost, Master and Apprentice, and then the Queen's Handmaiden, whatever the heck it was, the Amidala novel, which was very compelling. All 3 were solid and very great reads. I've also done some retro reviews of the prequels, and I'm also going to be covering the original trilogy and just taking another peek at both The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, or the remake awakens, the requel awakens. You can also find me on youtube.com/The Horror Show channel. That is probably, if you're here, where you came from, and I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, we do at least one, sometimes 2 episodes every single day. We are rounding out the campaign for Cecil's written and directed upcoming short film called Dylan's New Nightmare. That is a direct sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare and includes the return of Miko Hughes. If you see this and the Indiegogo is still transpiring, please jump over and take a peek, make a donation, and if not able, just spread the word. My band Chiron has a song called Another Nightmare Is Here that is going to be featured in the film next year that I'm very excited about. And lastly, every Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Phoenix time currently, because Arizona doesn't abide by those weird daylight savings rules. But yes, 6 Pacific and 9 p.m. Eastern is when I jump on the Willis Screedia YouTube channel, and am so stoked to be a part of show business with Lindsay Mimsy and the showrunner over there, CP himself, discussing all things box office from the previous weekend, breaking down the numbers, looking ahead to the upcoming one, and also having palaver about some of the biggest news stories of the previous week. So I have been Fuego. Y'all have been awesome as always, and until the wheel of Ka comes around once more, and I have to say wheel this time as opposed to real, because it kind of goes that way. But I am hopeful that we get to share more film palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, adios, pedal to the metal, peoples.